Welcome to the Tech Talks podcast. Today I'm joined by Coach Brady Volmering. Brady, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me, man.
Dude, no, pleasure's all mine. Thanks for taking the time to come on here and chat with us. For those of you guys that don't know Brady, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? Let's start with your history as an athlete, kind of recoup that, and then go into your transition into coaching, and then kind of how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah. So growing up, I was very interested in anything that had to do with sports. I played played soccer when I was younger, football, basketball, baseball, pretty much anything that involved the ball, involved athletics. I was very interested in. And what eventually happened is I got very interested in baseball specifically. So when I was in 8th or 9th grade, probably somewhere around there, I began really looking for and digging for different information that would help me develop myself as a player. So like now everyone's on, Instagram or Twitter or whatever they're on. That's kind of the source. Podcasts like this, the source that athletes will get their information from now. Back then it was like online forums. So I don't know if you ever got into any of that stuff. But there was a couple of baseball forums that were online. So really what I started doing was keeping an online training log on one of these forums, and I would get feedback from different people on the forums. They direct me to different information. I'd be looking at, different articles, kind of some of the OGs in the baseball world, like Eric Cressey, read a lot of their stuff, Paul Nyman, read a lot of his stuff, and just trying to take in all of this so that I could, develop myself to be the best that I could be as an athlete. So what that led to is I eventually did end up playing in college. So I started my first year and a half at Saginaw Valley in Michigan there. And then during my sophomore year, I then transferred to Cornerstone University, which is in Grand Rapids in Michigan, and finished out my career there. But how that kind of led into coaching was because of all this kind of knowledge, information that I was getting, started searching at a pretty young age. I eventually started putting up blog posts online because either I thought it would help other people or I just wanted to, have somewhere to kind of throw my thoughts on a piece of paper. Whatever the case is, I don't really remember why I started. But because of those blog posts, because of those articles, I started getting interest from different athletes that would ask my opinion on, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So eventually what that led into is kind of designing a template where I could then actually train these players. So I started DAC Baseball, which is a remote training business right now. So I started that. I ran that during my senior year of college. So I was doing both baseball, school, and then getting that going. And then that kind of led to eventually I went out to Missouri, which if you guys would go back and listen to the Jared Burton talk, he kind of goes through that a little bit. But we were out in Missouri training athletes actually on site for about 6 months there. And now I'm back to doing full on remote. But it's really just kind of that interest that I had when I was younger that led me to, start DAC and really dig into what I'm doing now.
That's awesome, man. And a lot of similarities to my story as well. Like you said, you're kind of dating yourself a bit with the forums and all of that. Like that was it, man. Like when I was in grade 10, like I remember wrestling my older brother to get on the computer so I could read Joe DeFranco and Zach Evan-Nash and all these different blogs and forums, because like you had to put in the legwork to get the information back in those days, which again was only 10 to 15 years ago, but it was different. And now it's all over Instagram and Twitter and everything, like you said. So I resonate with that. I miss those days sometimes where it was a little harder to get info, because now.
Well, yeah. And I think that's really interesting because like something that I always think back on is, I never had to be pushed to research. I never had to be pushed to train. I never had to be pushed to do any of that, like by my parents, by coach or whoever else. I was kind of lucky in that the area that I grew up in was pretty, it was pretty laid back. And then also my parents didn't really push me towards anything. It was, they saw that, okay, I really like this. This is what I want to do. I'm driven to do this. And they even were like, okay, but you still got to do other work. So that just, drove me to kind of be more interested because, I would have to go get my work done, but then I could really dive in on the baseball stuff. So I just think that's interesting in terms of, what's going to happen today is, parents, coaches, shouldn't necessarily have to push their players, I think, as hard as some think they have to. It should really be player driven. And it seems like that's something that we've lost a little bit. And that I think we need to get back to. Like, it should be driven by the athlete, and the coach is there to support that, not the other way around.
Yeah. Well, and then, yeah, exactly what you just said there. But then also to piggyback on that, like now information is so readily available, and on Instagram and on Twitter, it's not really who's putting out the best information. It's who's the best marketer and who can go viral faster and get in front of the most amount of people. So it doesn't even necessarily mean all this information that's readily available on every kid's fingertips nowadays is the best information. Whereas when we were doing it, you had to seek out that information online. And at that point in time, it was really only the top people in the industry that you could go and get info from. So there's a ton of misinformation out there now. And I think that leads people kind of down the wrong path in a lot of avenues.
I made a post about that the other day, which obviously wasn't very popular, but it was like, a video, and then on top it was like pro's name here to get your attention, and then subtitle here to draw you in, and it was like, slow motion video here to get you interested. So it was like, this is how like part of being able to process information is being able to critically think for yourself. So like, you have to understand, in me being in it and having tested all these different things, I kind of understand how it works, in that, like, when you're putting out content, you put it out with a title, you put it out with a visual, that quote unquote looks good, because that's going to get the most views, right? That's what people like. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean that the information is actually good. So like, young athletes out there that are looking for information, just because there's a good graphic or it looks like it's something cool, like, be able to critically think for yourself and kind of process, does this information actually make sense? Or is this just something that they're using as a marketing tool to get you into training? So it's just, critically thinking is one of the biggest skills, the most important skills, I think, for us to have.
Mm-hmm. And critically thinking isn't, does this pro guy do it? Okay, well, then it must be good, because a lot of these pro guys, they train like idiots, and they're pro because they're genetic freaks, not because their training makes sense. Like, I can just picture a million different viral videos I saw over the last year of pro athletes doing some of the stupidest things I've ever seen in my life. And now all of a sudden these kids, they want to go and emulate that because, oh, so-and-so is an all pro and he did this, so that's what I got to be doing. It's like, oh God, man, we're fighting an uphill battle here, guys, and like us trying to do our best to do it the right way. And the marketing machine and the people with better taglines than us are winning the kids over and getting the eyes on them, even though what they're doing isn't that great. But
right, I do want to throw in there, that's not to say, because that also somewhat comes back on the coach, in that, okay, if you know that you have good information and what you're doing is actually the right, correct way, whatever that means. It is like a correct way to do it. Again, I don't really know what that means, but
you're coming that one.
Yeah, you're coming from a good place, right? You can't kind of completely blame people that are marketing. It's also like, you need to understand how that process works so that you can get your information out there. Mm-hmm. Like, just because you don't know marketing right now doesn't mean that you can't learn that, and that, because like, understanding that is going to help you get your message out better. Yeah. So that's just something that I think I've seen with some coaches where they talk about, well, this person has this many followers, this many views, whatever. Well, it's like, yeah, but also kind of like, if you don't like it, then figure out what they're doing. And if your information is actually better, then that's going to be beneficial for athletes. Yeah. So it's kind of both ends of the sword of, you kind of got to figure that end out too. Especially just like that's kind of where we are today. So
yeah, and that's a totally fair interjection, right? Like, it's
right.
I think you clarified that there. Like, it's certainly not to say if you're seeing somebody's stuff and their marketing, it doesn't mean it's bad. That was a generalization on my part, just saying a lot of the times kids do get caught in these traps where the information is bad and the marketing is good. But there is good information and good marketing. Like you said, Eric Cressy, right? You see videos and you see their stuff everywhere in the baseball world. That content is gold, in my opinion. Like, I think Cressy's kind of like the gold standard for baseball training, right? They're good at marketing. They're good at getting their stuff out on social media. They've got lots of pro guys doing it, but that's an example of people that are doing it the right way, where we could list a handful of people doing it the wrong way. But I think I want to backtrack a little bit too. We went on a kind of a little tangent there, but that's okay. That's what this is for. We're having fun. So you said you played baseball. You went to two separate schools. They're both in Michigan, correct?
Yes.
Is
Yep.
that where you're originally from Michigan?
Yep. Yep.
Nice.
I'm from Michigan, grew up in Michigan. So yeah, that's where I'm from. Yep.
And we got set up, and you became a guest here because of the episode that I did with Jared Burton. And did you guys play baseball together, or how did you two get linked up?
Yeah, so he went to a different school his first 1 or 2 years as well. He transferred in during my junior year. So yeah, we obviously we were both pretty interested in just baseball at that time. And then like he kind of went down that whole, or he told the whole story of how, we were both working on a tree farm, and I was listening to the podcast, and I was like, hey, let's go on this trip. Or I was going to go on the trip, and he said, hey, like, I'll join you. So yeah, with him, we ended up going on that 30-day trip. And then we actually ended up moving in the same apartment after that. Then that's kind of how we got pretty deep down into some rabbit holes, and still do, I guess. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, like now we know a little bit more about you, which is awesome. And we've gone on a little social media marketing tirade. So, which is all good. So DAC baseball, you said you guys were working in Missouri, and you're training some people on site and doing that. And now you've shifted back to all remote. Was that just purely based on COVID and all the restrictions and that kind of stuff? Was that why that shift back to remote happened?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. There's also, it was definitely a learning experience. Being on site, it was a huge facility. And I just want to make sure that I say this the right way. We didn't do it as well as we probably could have, or as well as I wanted to. It was very good. But it was a learning process. There's adjustments that I wanted to make, just in terms of understanding. On the business side of things, when you go on site, there's many more things that you have to consider. And the number of athletes that you're able to handle, the quality that you're able to provide in terms of like athlete to coach ratio. I love to have a smaller athlete to coach ratio so that we can dig down into some deeper rabbit holes. And we just quite honestly got to a point there where we didn't feel like we were able to do that anymore. So that's kind of why we ended up backing out. And then, now I have that experience. I know that. And so I'm trying to kind of build back into that. But now with a better understanding of how to handle that situation, so that the quality is still there, so that we can dig deep down rabbit holes with these athletes, and really provide them the best experience. And again, that's not to say that it was bad at all. Like, in my opinion, baseball in general is so far behind. It's a very, very slow changing sport. What we did was quite honestly, I think, better than what anyone else is doing. But it still wasn't quite up to the standard that I want to have. So now I'm really just digging back in and with that new knowledge going again. So.
Yeah, like you said, it didn't go the way you wanted, but doesn't mean it was a bad experience. It's a great learning opportunity. And, guys like us that are young, trying to make it work in this field, like there's tons of what some people might perceive as losses, but we just kind of wear it on the chin and see it as a learning opportunity, because like there's a huge difference in running a facility and running a gym and coaching people. Like those are opposite ends of a spectrum, where one is a lot less fun. I'll let people figure out which one is less fun, the coaching or the business operations. So with DAC baseball, like you said, you're trying to strive towards, this level of quality or of what you're trying to do with the athletes that you work with. Like, are you purely on the strength and conditioning side, or are you purely on the skill side, or are you some hybrid in between?
So in terms of that actual athletes that we work with, we have different options, because some athletes, maybe can't afford all options, because we do go very in depth. So basically what we do is we offer everything. So we offer lifting, we offer throwing, we offer hitting, and we offer speed that goes with that. But it's kind of more than that, in terms of we're also trying to address the person themselves. So like something that I got from, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Tommy John.
Oh yeah. He was actually one of my first guests on this podcast.
Okay, was he?
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and listen to that one. So I got a lot of stuff from him in terms of just understanding kind of how to put the person first. So like addressing their belief systems, addressing their purpose, their breathing, their relationships, their sleep, their nutrition, their movement. All of that is human based. It's not really baseball based, but like if we think about development in terms of a pyramid, the bottom of that pyramid is you as a person, and the person themselves, like the bottom of their pyramid is survival. So like base level, as a human, we're trying to survive. That's kind of the lowest that we can get. And the top, the highest part of this pyramid that we can get to is your specific sport performance, right? That's very specific thing that you're trying to do. If you as a person are still have areas of you that are stuck in this survival mode. So like, let's say, just to make an example, to make this a little more digestible, let's say you have trouble or you struggle with handling your breathing. So just kind of for some base knowledge, like breathing, we want it to be through the nose. We want it to be slow. We want it to be quiet so that you can't hear it, so that no one else can hear it, because this helps put you in a parasympathetic state, which is basically rest / digest. And that's going to help you to recover and be able to handle stressors better. If you chronically mouth breathe, if you chronically breathe shallow through your neck, through your chest, that is going to greatly affect the change that we can make in your training. Because if you're in this chronic sympathetic or fight or flight state, you're never able to recover in this rest and digest state. So we might have you on the best training program in the world, but if you're not able to get into a relaxed state, which is where the adaptation actually happens, then that the best training program in the world isn't actually going to have any effect. Or it's going to have an effect, but it's going to be limited by the fact that you still don't have control over this basic component, which is your breath. And that goes with all of those. Like, your belief system. Do you have beliefs set upon you, maybe by coaches, by parents, whoever it might be, that, you're limited in what you can do? It's the same thing. All these different aspects can be pulling you down into that survival mode. So we're trying to, for lack of a better term, release you from those kind of inhibitions so that you can then rise up out of that survival mode and get closer to that top part of the pyramid, which is your performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome, man. So like you said, you're trying to take this, if we were to boil that down, you're trying to take this holistic approach that really focuses on why you came here in the first place last, and all of these things that you don't understand or the athlete doesn't understand as part of the puzzle. You're trying to address all those things first. And like I said, off air before we started, like that's very similar to how I approach things as well. I know a lot of the times athletes, they want to do that big sexy thing because that's what they think is going to move the needle forward. But at the end of the day, like you said, you could have this best program ever and whatever, right? But if you're not addressing all of these low-hanging fruits, you're either going to get a fraction of the results, or there's going to be a pretty short timeline on that period of adaptation, and then eventually things are going to fizzle out. So like you said, I like to, similar to you, go straight to the bottom and then work our way back up. And you got to be pretty good at getting that buy-in from the athletes to actually do that, because like you said, they sign up, oh, I want to go to DAC baseball because I want to hit harder, not necessarily like, oh, I want to breathe better. And then it's your job as a coach to get them to connect those dots and understand, hey, like, you want to hit better? All right, well, this is where we're starting. So
yeah, and that's so I just very, very recently put these together, but based upon like all this different stuff that I've been learning, that's why like I now have kind of a packet that they can take, or a packet that I'll give them when they first start, so that they know where I'm coming from. And within that packet, like, it's kind of laid out, this is how all these different aspects relate to your performance. So it's like giving that example of, just like, let's say for sleep, for example, like just giving that example of your body literally doesn't repair your tissues. Like, let's say you work out, your body literally won't repair your tissues as well, which means that you're not going to recover as well if you don't get the proper sleep. If these tissues don't recover, your next training session is affected. So it's like kind of breaking it down and giving them these examples to help them to understand, okay, all these different 7 things that he laid out actually do matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of goes into like something that I've been talking a lot about lately is like your rehab. And again, this is kind of another Tommy John or Dr. Tommy John concept where like your rehab is your training is your rehab. Really everything that we're doing is everything that we're doing is training. It's all related. Like we can't say I went to get my workout in, I can check that box and now I'm done. Well, no, it's not quite that simple. Like literally every time that you move, your brain is sending your body information. So like, yes, that information that your brain is receiving is increased during your workout, but still we want to be giving our body that good information all the time. So it's just helping them to understand that it's more than checking the boxes, got my workout done, got my sleep, got my nutrition, got my breathing. Try not to check boxes and more understanding that it's all, it all plays a part.
Everything you do affects everything you do.
Yeah.
without scaring people, it's really getting them to understand that, right? Like when you say that, like I just did there, it sounds scary, but if you can zoom out for a second and really look at that and understand that, like, yeah, everything you do affects literally everything you do. How you are mentally affects how you are physically. How you are physically affects how you are mentally, and then we can go on and on about how that affects sleep and this and that and whatever and recovery. But at the end of the day, it's our job as coaches is to get athletes to understand that, and then slowly but surely get them on board with that and just move the needle forward every single day. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of like about how I have things set up now is like I lay out these principles, these ideas, and it's not for everybody to be quite honest. Like some people do just want your basic $25 hitting program. So like that's okay. This is what we do. Other people provide that. So it's kind of a self-selection process where you get the athletes that are really interested in digging deeper and learning more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The athletes that have that, like that thirst or that hunger to get to the next level, you put this in front of them, they'll devour it. And those guys that are looking for a quick, simple shortcut or something like that, like they're not about what you have to offer. And you just got to catch the fish that like your bait and be okay with that. And that was actually for me as a young coach, that was a big learning opportunity as well. Cause it's like, man, you know what, like I can help you. Like if you would just get out of your own way and, I could help you. And then it's like, for a second, you gotta be like, oh wait, yeah, that person only wants to be helped the way that they want to be helped. And they'll just go and find someone that will do what they want. Like they've already, like you said, they've got that belief system or they've got their mind already set on what they think they need. And they're just too set in their ways. They've got like that fixed mindset where they're not willing to, expand and grow and hear different trains of thoughts and approach things differently. And you're like, well, that's why you reached out to me in the first place, man. Like I'm the professional.
Right. And I mean, yeah. And them kind of having that, it's okay. It's okay. Like it's okay. I mean, if they're meant to, if eventually they're meant to kind of dive into that, they'll find it. That's why my approach is I'm not trying to convince you that what I'm doing is right necessarily. I'm just putting out the information. The people that are at a point where they understand and resonate with that information are gonna, kind of come to understand what you're saying, and then they'll be the ones that ultimately take advantage of it. So it's not, it's not really trying to force anything on anybody. It's just, hey, this is what I do. I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right. Take it as you will, I guess.
Yeah. And that's where I got to, right. It was just a learning process for me as a young coach. It was like, after a few months, I was like, yep, I'm just going to tell people this is what I do. This is how I do things. You make your own decision. If it's right for you, let's party and we can do this. And if it's not, that's fine too. And if you need help trying to find someone who can help you the way you want to be helped, like let me know and I'll do my best to make sure you're getting what you need. But this is how I do things. And it's not confrontational. It's not aggressive. It's not anything. It's just, hey man, this is just the way it is.
Right.
And we'll go from there. So, all right, man. Well, let's actually dive in on your area of expertise, which is, if I'm being honest, an area that I have no experience in at all. I'm trying to go through my head, and I've actually never worked with a baseball athlete. I haven't played baseball since I was probably like 12, like formally. Like I obviously messed around with my buddies and stuff, but I haven't played actually like a formal baseball game since I was like 12. So let's talk about baseball training, because I'm pretty involved in the training world, obviously, and I'm an observer of all sports, not just the sports that I work with. And like baseball is just one of those ones where like it just seems like you said earlier, it's pretty behind the times, and it's maybe archaic in a bit. So why don't you talk about the training landscape for baseball, and maybe some of the mistakes you see people making, and maybe some of the advice that you would offer them? You still there? All right, we had a little connection issue there, but hopefully we're back and ready to go. So essentially what I was saying there, Brady, was, your area of expertise is baseball. That's something I know very little about and have very little experience doing. But from an outsider looking in standpoint, it seems like there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of people that are kind of practicing behind the times. So in your opinion, what are some of like the biggest mistakes that you see people making, and maybe focusing more on the developmental, the youth or high school athlete, baseball player, but what are some of the mistakes you see them making, and then some advice that you would maybe offer them in terms of, getting on the right path? And I'll throw some air quotes on that, because what does that even mean?
Right. Yeah. So if we're thinking about kind of the youth or the younger, the high school athlete, really, I think it comes down to baseball as a sport where it's very focused around skill development. It's very focused around lessons, and it's very focused around like, don't break, don't break the athlete. So like if you were to relate it to football, it would be like a wide receiver going and getting step-by-step footwork prescription, and that's like all they do. So like baseball is obviously a sport. Let's take hitting, for example, where it's very difficult at the highest level, moving ball, moving very fast. You have very little reaction time. The pitchers are getting much better at making the ball move in different ways. But yet what we do for training is like, hey, go hit off the tee, and then you're going to do underhand front toss for 20 minutes while we talk about you trying to, change this mechanical issue. So really the biggest mistake that I'm seeing in general in the baseball world, and in my opinion, this is even with some of the more recognized names, is that like we have to understand that athletes aren't fragile, but also we have to understand that athletes need a base. So it's kind of like two ends of the spectrum. Number one, your athletes shouldn't be getting skill development. They shouldn't really be getting lessons if they can't, do a push-up, or if they can't like balance their own body weight on one leg, like whatever the case is. Because I see so many times where it's like people will come to me for hitting instruction, or they'll come to me for throwing instruction, but they don't want to do the physical training. And, they say, well, we're already doing physical training. What's that? Well, the physical training is we're doing ladders and we're doing bands 3 days a week. Like that's not really going to develop a base as an athlete. So just like the overall physical development in the baseball world, and I think this would go for all sports. Like even if you think about basketball, with AAU becoming so prominent, the overall general physical preparedness of the athletes that are coming up is very, very low. And we're trying to treat them as baseball players first, when we should be trying to treat them as humans first. So what's that mean? We need to get in. It doesn't necessarily even have to be in the gym. Like I talked about this a little bit on an Instagram post that I made recently, on the fitness pages that I have. Like when I was growing up, I worked on a farm in the summers, and we would do straw, right? So it'd be 95 degrees outside. We'd be up in a straw mow. So up there, it'd be like 105, 110 degrees. And we do straw from 10 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. And we would maybe have a 2-hour break for lunch and dinner during that time. But we would do probably around 20 wagons of straw per day. So if someone doesn't kind of understand how that process works, basically you have a wagon that comes in, you're in a barn, they shoot straw bales up like a conveyor. you get the straw bales off the conveyor, and my job was to throw them to other people so that they would then stack them in the barn. So you have roughly 150 bales per wagon. And let's say I'm handling half, so I'm throwing 75 bales that weigh 40 pounds 20 times. So I think I did the math, and it was like 1,500, quote unquote, rotational throws per day, right? If we were to take your average athlete and say, okay, we're going to be doing 1,500 med ball throws today, like that's not going to happen. But it's looked at now as, oh, we give you 3 sets of 5 rotational med ball throws. Like if we give you any more than that, your athlete's going to break. Or, we have you do 15 depth drops. Any more than that, your athlete's going to break. But really it's like, it's just our perception of what a lot of work is. Because like going back to kind of physical preparation, general physical preparation, again, this is just my perspective, but like working in the straw might help prepare me for sport, right? It helped prepare my body to understand that it can handle a ton of workload. And that wasn't baseball specific. It wasn't basketball specific. It was just stressing the body in general. And again, I just think that that's something that we're really lacking. And that's a reason that we're seeing so many injuries. We have athletes that are very good at being specific, but that can't handle general workload because of kind of the way they're being brought up.
Mm-hmm. And that's like, we used that pyramid analogy earlier, and we could use that again here, where that GPP, that general physical preparedness, like that is your base of anything that you're going to do athletically. So like youth athletes specifically, it doesn't matter the sport, like build that base, build it right, and trust the process, because people are so, like you mentioned there, people are in this rush to work to their specific skill, but you have no base to build from. So that's not going to be that's not a stable long-term option. That's pretty I would say that's a recipe for failure in my personal opinion.
We're seeing that, like, you'll have 12 or 13-year-olds that need to go to physical therapy 3 days a week. And they'll have a catching coach, they'll have a hitting coach, they'll have a fielding coach, like they'll have all these different things, when really, like, up until the point that you're probably in high school, like when you're doing your sport, it's just to go out, play, have fun, and kind of experience movement. Like there are going to be 1 or 2 kids out of maybe 50 or 100 who are like, I really like to play baseball, I really like to play basketball, I know this is what I want to do. And we can handle those cases too, right? But like even for them, if we're looking at that pyramid, and okay, you're going to play your sport 5 or 6 days a week, that's fine. We need to get you to do physical preparation type work at least 7 times, or at least like double that you're going and playing your sport. And that's just not happening. And again, you kind of asked what I think the biggest mistake that we're making is, and I think that's it, is we're not building that base, because I think we're afraid to put too much, quote unquote, stress on these athletes. And we just don't understand that no, stress is actually what causes the body to adapt. And we should be providing a lot more stress, but it should be general stress, not stress that's related to their specific skill or their specific sport.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that stems from parents and coaches, because they, whether it's for their own reasons as a parent or the coach, or because they see that that's what their kid is striving for, is to reach a certain level. These parents or coaches, okay, well, if you want to get there, little Timmy, then okay, we're going to get you your hitting coach, we're going to get you your fielding coach, we're going to get you your catching coach, we're going to get this. Like, it's like, okay, but they're never actually going to get there with that strategy, because they're going to get overuse injuries, they're going to get hurt, and it's like they have no base. So it's really like we need people to have this like paradigm shift. So it's like, hey, we want you to be really good at this specific thing, so you can go and like get a scholarship or go become pro, whatever it is these people want. So to do that, we're going to go and do the most general stuff ever, and we're going to do a shit ton of it. Like, it's like, that's where we need people to get to. But I think it all stems from a lack of education, a lack of knowledge. And then I guess we could go back to our earlier conversation of really good marketing that makes people feel like that's what they need to be doing.
Yep. And that's just what I was thinking is, sorry to cut you off there.
No, not at all, man.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It's funny because I was going to say the exact same thing. And that's why I said that. Like, if you're a coach that is kind of promoting these type of ideas, like it's not your responsibility, because not everyone wants to, be have that type of influence. Like, I think it is really good to just have your set of athletes that you work with and you do a very good job for them. But in order to kind of combat these people that are good at marketing but maybe really bad at the training side, like, we do need some people that understand what's happening on the marketing side, but also know that, like, know the actual basis of training is that we need to first build this base, then we can then we can create general athletes, then we can create specific athletes. So if people know both of those, where they know how to market, they know how to get the word out, and then they also understand the basic principles of training, that's kind of the ultimate combo. And it's tough because, like, this is something that I struggle with all the time, is how much time do I spend, putting together information to put out posts, and how much time do I spend, like, actually working with athletes or actually digging deeper, going down rabbit holes so that I can provide better service. So there's always kind of, I always kind of have this conversation or fight in my mind of, am I doing too much of this? Am I not doing enough of that? But I think, like, ultimately you just have to find that kind of that right balance for you. And it might take a little bit more work to do both. But I think in the long run, in terms of, like, the general state of athletics, like, it's going to be better for, if you have that message, to be able to get it out there.
100%. And don't worry, you're not crazy. I have that same conversation in my head all the freaking time, because it's like, you want to spend some time and look into some marketing or look into this or that, but that stuff doesn't light me up. Like, I didn't choose this career path because I wanted to make cool looking Instagram posts or market to the masses. Like, I wanted to work with people and help people. And so I feel that same way. But the perspective shift that I had to make, or what I'm trying to make, it's an ever evolving process, is that if you believe in what you do and you think you can have some benefit, then it is almost your obligation to share that, because you're trying to fight that uphill battle where there's so much misinformation out there, that if you have something that you deem is worthwhile in saying, it's kind of almost your obligation to share that. And that's kind of what this ended up becoming, this podcast. Like, that's why I took step one to it, is like, you know what, I'm just going to try and create a podcast where I connect with other coaches and we try and diffuse all the stuff that we know and make it accessible and deliverable to athletes, so that we can kind of share our thoughts and what we think is best for them long term, always keeping that kind of long term vision in mind.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's when you said, you're trying to make, there are a lot of coaches podcasts, and you said, you're trying to make it more of an athlete driven podcast. I think that's a really good idea, because I do think we need both. We need
podcasts. Hell yeah.
That are targeted at the coach, that, you go super in depth in terms of, like, this is what's happening in the nervous system, this is what's happening, and all these different things. I do think that's important, because that gives coaches a chance to learn and grow. But then we also need to be able to relay this information in digestible terms to the athlete. Both the athletes that you're personally working with, and then also, if you're trying to, spread good knowledge, also the athletes that are going to be taking in your knowledge there.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's what I don't get me wrong. Like, I listen to probably 3 to 5 coaches podcasts a week, and I love them. And they've been massive parts of opening my eyes to exploring different things. And I don't necessarily listen to podcasts to say, oh, this guy talked about that, so now I'm going to go do this. It's like, this guy talked about that, now I'm going to go and, like, research that and think about that a little bit more and see, does it even make sense for what I'm doing or my context or my athletes or whatever. And I love that. And that is a huge part of my life, and it has been for 5 years now. But what I identified a lot of times, and really it came out of a lot of my buddies were athletes, whether that was university or professional, and I might listen to a podcast with them or talk to them about a podcast, and they're just sitting there like, what the hell did you just say? Or what the hell did that guy just say? And I remember I was listening to a podcast with my one buddy, and I had to pause it every 2 minutes and be like, all right, so what they're saying is this. And he'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then play, and then pause. And we do it again, and we kept doing it. And I'm like, man, you know what? There should really be something that's for athletes or geared towards athletes. And, eventually you just, if there's not something there and you think there's benefit to it, you just do it yourself. And not to say that this is any good or whatever, but that was the motivation to make this all kind of happen, and why I'm reaching out to guys like you and trying to have these conversations and hear your thoughts and have some banter back and forth, and hopefully share some valuable tidbits of information along the way.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to kind of expand on one point you made there, where you talked about, you'll hear different ideas or different concepts on, like, let's say a podcast, and then you'll research deeper. And that's part of, like, if I'm talking to young athletes that are listening right now, that's part of how you should also process information is, okay, let's say that you do find something interesting that actually makes sense on Instagram, or you do on a podcast like this as well. Instead of just kind of taking that for its base level, kind of dig in, either reach out to the person that put out the information to try to kind of get more resources from them, or take the topic that they're talking about. Like, let's say someone makes a post about like breathing, or about, how emotions affect how you play or how you recover, whatever the case might be. Kind of take those key terms and maybe go and search, go to Google, go to whatever you search on, go there and try to dig a little bit deeper, because just kind of scrolling through Instagram, which, again, I think that's how we get a lot of our information now, just kind of mindlessly scrolling and reading. It doesn't really become yours until you internalize that. And that means that either you write about it, you talk to someone about it, or you kind of dig deeper on your own, because that helps to make it, like, literally a part of your, of your circuits in your brain, because you're processing it, you're thinking about it. So I would just encourage, like, with information that you're getting, really try to go beyond the surface level, and dig a little deeper, because that's going to help you to understand it that much better, then apply it to, your sport, your practice, whatever you're doing, that much better.
Yeah. And then I guess an addition that I'd throw on top of that is, when you are hearing these things and starting to critically think about it, try to understand the context in which it was applied as well. And then think about, does that make sense to you or to your situation? Because, like you said, you could see something on Instagram and it's a great, we'll say, exercise or drill. It's a great exercise. It's a great drill. It directly affects this thing, and it's really good at it, and it's from a reputable source. But that might actually make no sense for you right now and where you're at. So understanding the context in which it's being applied, and then understand the context in which you're trying to train or improve in, and see, really, does that make sense? And if you don't have the skills to do that process on your own, which is fine, because, a lot of 16-year-olds don't have that ability, right? Like, reach out to the person. Like, if people are reaching out to you, or people are reaching out to me, like, we like helping people. We answer these questions all the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, don't be afraid to dig deeper, because guys like us that are out there working, and, I'm not the greatest at putting out information, just because I just get bogged down in the social media world. I don't love it too much. But whenever people ask questions for me, like, man, I'm all there, because I know you're eager. I know you're curious. I know you care. Man, I'll work hard. Like, I'll work hard to help you. Like, I got a kid who, it's like, oh, I got this problem. I got this problem. I got this problem. It's like, all right, send me a video of this, send me a picture of that. Like, let's talk about how that feels. Like, we're willing to help. You just got to show some initiative, and we'll go all in on with you for the most part. Yeah. Like, obviously we're not giving away free services like left, right, and center, or else, we would have to go get regular jobs. But, we're always there to help and answer questions as much as we can.
No, for sure. And I feel like this turned into a podcast where, like, we maybe didn't dive into specific training modalities, but we talked about, like, information processing. But I think that's so vital, is just, like, learning how to critically think. That's part of being a human, and knowing, just processing information and applying stuff to yourself. Like, I just feel like that's something that's missing so much. And I think we covered that quite a bit, which, I think is something that really need to be covered. Instead of just talking again about, well, this is what you do in the weight room. All that stuff is great, but you need to be able to process this stuff and kind of make it your own, which, I think it's huge that we kind of touched on that.
Yeah, totally accidental too. Like that wasn't really the
Right.
plan, but
Totally,
hey,
totally the goal, but that's where we
hey,
went.
sometimes that's what happens, and that's the beauty of these. Like once you start hitting record, you don't really know what's going to happen, and that's kind of what I like about it. It's that it's fun, and it kind of just takes on a life of its own and just evolves the way that it's supposed to, which I like, because it's more conversational and less scripted. We ain't got no scripts over here, people. We just winging it. Well, Brady, man, what else do you got? Anything else you want to share? Any parting gifts? Still there?
Sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Oh,
what was the?
Just basically saying that just as we wrap up
here, you cut out for a second. Sorry.
Just doing it again. All right, just as we're wrapping up here, I was just saying, is there any last things that you want to share or talk about before we kind of head out?
Just I think we covered again like the critically thinking topic pretty well today. If any of your listeners like do have specific questions on actual baseball training or just general physical training in general, they can feel free to reach out. I do have some, or I am willing to kind of talk with people, and if they're that actual eager person where their coach isn't pushing them, the parent isn't pushing them, those are the athletes that we want to work with. So like if that is you, and you want to dig deeper, just don't be afraid to take that initiative and actually care. Like it's kind of cool I feel like for kids to say now, like, oh, well, why are you trying so hard? Why do you care so much? Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of a good thing. Like the people that do that are going to go much further. So if that's you, don't be afraid to kind of let that ambition out and, pursue it with everything that you got.
Yeah. I don't know when it happened, but all of a sudden being a try hard was like not cool. And it's like, I don't know, man, trying hard it's pretty cool. Think of anyone that that's ever done anything notable, and I can guarantee you they tried pretty freaking hard. So lean into that, embrace it, just accept that's who you are, and good things will happen. All right. And then in terms of like you said, if people want to connect with you, they can. Where can they find you at? What's the best way? Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the best way. Right now I have two different pages. I don't know if I'll keep it that way. But yeah, right now it's for like specific baseball content. It's DAC Baseball, at DAC Baseball, DAC Baseball. And then for like training content, it's at DAC Fitness and Health.
Awesome. And I'll link that stuff in the show notes on Instagram and on YouTube. And if you have a website or anywhere else you want me to direct people, just let me know, and I'll post all that stuff in there. But like, again, man, like I said, it didn't go the way we thought it was going to go, but it was a great conversation. It was a ton of fun. I appreciate your time and coming on here, and hopefully some people listen to the things that we talked about and actually take it in, because like obviously it's something we both believe is an issue, and critically thinking, whether it's baseball, whether it's life, whether it's football, whatever, man, it's an important skill. And I think we did a pretty decent job of unpacking that idea here today. So thanks again, Brady.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.